Brian, obviously, just want to get your take on the team that training today. I saw a couple of players come off early. Raul, Leo, even Pedro came off early. Just some thoughts on that.
Raul's still dealing with some knee pain and toe pain. Leo is just feeling ill. I don't know if it's food poisoning or something. His stomach was bothering him. And Pedro, that was a designed training session. We've got 3 games next week, and we need to manage his load. So I think the sports science guys have done a good job of, making sure that he's sharp, because he needs some sharpness. But also, if he's going to participate in all 3 games, which he hasn't done all year, we got to get it right.
What about JP?
JP was in partial training today. Thank you for that question. He's getting better, getting close. Trick with JP is when we come back, he won't be involved in this game, but if there's a possibility for Vancouver or Colorado, he needs to get into a real training, but because of the condensed schedule, our training sessions are going to be kind of light. So we might have to, take a little bit of a risk if he looks like he's ready, but I would always prefer to have at least a couple of full trainings in before we run him back out there.
Jackson, with the signing, you kind of mentioned it though in the release, but you like having Seattle guys on the team. So having another one that's locked
I like
in
good
for a
soccer
little bit.
players,
Okay, yeah.
smart soccer players.
Yeah.
But no, Jackson fits both of those. He's a Seattleite, he's a smart kid. His path is different. He started off with the academy, then went to college, and that's not a bad thing for some people. And he's, developed really well. I think his partnership with Ymar is a good one. And, I think he's been the beneficiary of right place, right time. His time in Chicago, I don't know what happened there, but it just didn't work out. And then I saw you guys interviewing Wade. I think Wade and the academy guys did a really good job. Defiance. Kind of bringing him to a certain point, and then when he had his opportunity, he was ready for it.
How much do you feel that the culture part comes into play, like him being able to reach out to Wade and get an opportunity, and you have lots of other players who've had opportunities to come. How much does that play a part in the development of being able to retain your locals?
Well, I think Wade, I would answer that question by Wade's a good judge of talent. He was a center back, kind of saw some things in Jackson. We followed him, of course, because he was in our academy. And, their relationship, I'm not privy to all the conversations they had, but I'm certainly glad that they had whatever conversation to get him back here in the first place.
It's a little easy to take for granted because it's been this way now for a while, but there aren't a lot of teams that have this much local talent in them. There's just half your roster went to high school or college in the Seattle area. And with a player like Jackson, sort of alluding to Jada's question, he is here in part because of the relationships, not just because he went off to college and he was gone. I mean, how do you? And then I guess how do you?
I don't want to
what do
take
you
that
make
as
of
a
it?
negative, like he's only here because of those relationships, because he had to put the work in. I know where you're kind of going with that. I might just be a homer and say, look, Seattle produces some good players. Even back when we were growing up, Jeff Durgan, Mark Peterson, Jeff Stock. Then you start with, me and Chance and Billy Crook and, Dickie McCormick. There was a lot of guys that came out of this area even way back when. And then you get now more money being put into academy teams, more resources, and there's kids that have that Northwest grit, that determination. And, we've always, said never quit. Some of those things are part of the culture. They, starting with going back to Darren Sawatsky when they first started the academy. I mean, those were things that we tried to ingrain into all the young players. Wade, local guy, so we had local coaches, local kids. I think it's all part of the same thing that you're kind of talking about, alluding to. But the kids have to prove that they're good enough as well.
Is there a ceiling that maybe you guys have hit, though? I mean, as far as having all of that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, because I watch Snyder, Sebastian, some of those kids. I mean, there's kids that are coming up that are pretty darn good.
How sustainable is that in today's MLS, where you have teams that are buying and getting a lot of talent, and what Seattle does, which is bringing in your own talent, keeping those players within your roster.
If the local guys help us win games, nobody's going to care where they come from. So there's your measure. There were times in my past, people are saying, well, you don't play a lot of young players. Well, if they're good enough, they're going to play. That's bottom line.
What about you and your contract negotiations? Where are you at?
I'm confident, Jada, that something's probably going to get taken care of.
On the positive side?
Well, I hope so. I sure hope so.
Do you feel that the playoffs or just the final run here plays a part in any of that? And I know you've been to 6 finals, one, like you're most highly decorated, so I'm not doubting
I'm confident that we'll get something together. What I'm focused on is just Houston and then Vancouver and then Colorado and finishing the year out strong. That would be the best case I could make for myself.
When you look at what the team has done over the last 2 years, I mean, it does feel like there was a point where this team was elite, that this team was looked at as the main of the West, and that's really dropped off over the last 2 years. So do you feel like that's going to be something against you?
I'm going to push back on that a little bit because that is a narrative that's out there. I read some of the stuff. But if you look at last year and you're trying to, take Nico Ladero, who was such a brilliant part of our team, and we end up second, and we come to within, 1 goal of playing a conference final at home against Houston that would have pushed us into the final against. Jordan has a chance early in the game, and it's 1-0, and it could go either way. And so, sports are sports. There's going to be a winner. There's going to be a loser. We've been successful. Maybe we haven't been as successful the last 2 years as we've been accustomed to, but that's not for a lack of, this organization, failing in any sort of grand way. I just think maybe, it's cyclical. And we're going to try and make this playoffs. And when we make the playoffs, then we're going to try and go as deep as we can. And then we can talk about this year.
For the record, you don't have interest to go elsewhere?
Well, it would be my preference to stay here.
Just a real quick question about Jordan. He's in the midst of his best scoring year of his career. He's in the midst of a pretty impressive run of form where he's got 16 goals in 23 games, something like that. Has he changed? I know the narrative for a long time has been, well, we're not quite sure if he's a 9. Has the change? Have you seen progress in that sense?
Closer. And look, there's different nuances. The number 9 that plays for Manchester City is different than, us, Jordan. They're just different characteristics. So, fact of the matter is, Jordan plays it a little bit differently. His measure is going to be, has he scored enough goals in the big games to push us through to help us win championships? That's going to be his measure. And if he does that, then we'll keep him as a 9.